She betrayed every vow she ever made with the one man who should have been off-limits. How far can desire push someone before it destroys everything they love? Tonight, a family's darkest secrets will surface, and nothing will ever be the same. Welcome back to Hidden Truths True Crime Stories. Subscribe and watch the full story now. The house was too quiet, the kind of silence that pressed against Evelyn Carter's ears until her own breathing sounded intrusive. Midnight had already passed, yet Daniel still wasn't home. Again. She sat at the edge of the couch, phone in hand, rereading the same unanswered message she had sent hours earlier. "Are you coming back tonight?" No reply. There never was. A glass of wine rested untouched on the table, its surface trembling slightly as a car passed outside. Evelyn told herself she was used to this, used to the waiting, the wondering, the slow erosion of certainty, but tonight felt heavier, as if something unseen had already entered the room. Then came the knock. It was sharp and deliberate, slicing through the silence. Evelyn froze. No one ever came this late. For a moment she didn't move, her pulse thudding in her throat as the knock came again, slower this time, almost patient. She stood, smoothing her sweater with shaking hands as she crossed the living room. The porch light revealed a tall figure through the frosted glass. When she opened the door, the words caught in her chest. Lucas Carter stood there, older than the photographs, yet unmistakable. Daniel's younger brother, the one no one spoke about anymore. "Evelyn," he said softly, as if afraid the name might break something. She stared, mind scrambling for logic. "Lucas, what are you?" She stopped herself, suddenly aware of the late hour, the emptiness behind her. "I thought you were still out west." "I was," he replied. His eyes lingered on her face, searching, measuring. "I didn't plan on coming back like this." The air between them felt charged, thick with unfinished history that wasn't even hers. She stepped aside without thinking. "You should come in." Lucas hesitated, then crossed the threshold. The door closed behind him with a quiet finality that made Evelyn's stomach tighten. He smelled faintly of rain and road dust, like someone who hadn't decided whether to stay. "Daniel isn't home," she said, the words spilling out awkwardly, defensively. Lucas nodded. "I figured." That answer unsettled her more than it should have. He set his bag down slowly, glancing around the room as if cataloging what had changed and what hadn't. This was Daniel's world, ordered and controlled, yet Lucas stood in it like an interruption. "You look tired," he said. Evelyn let out a breath that was almost a laugh. "It's been that kind of marriage." The moment the words left her mouth, she regretted them, but Lucas didn't react the way she expected. No shock, no judgment. Only a quiet understanding that made her feel exposed. "I didn't mean to show up unannounced," he said, "but I needed somewhere to go, somewhere safe." Safe. The word echoed uncomfortably. Evelyn glanced at the clock, then back at Lucas. Daniel was hours away, if he was coming home at all. She reached for the door lock, turning it slowly until it clicked. Only then did she realize how alone they truly were. Evelyn did not sleep that night. Lucas took the guest room, yet his presence lingered in every corner of the house, like a thought she refused to finish. Morning arrived without sunlight, clouds pressing low against the windows as if the sky itself was listening. Daniel came home just before dawn. She heard his keys before she heard his voice. The familiar jingle carried no comfort, only warning. Daniel moved through the house with practiced quiet, shrugging off his coat, avoiding her eyes. He looked the same as always, neatly dressed, controlled, untouched by absence. "You're up early," he said, noticing her in the kitchen. "I never slept," Evelyn replied. He nodded once, uninterested. "Long night at work," it wasn't a question. This was how their marriage survived. Through statements instead of conversations, through silence that swallowed truth before it could be spoken. Evelyn watched him pour coffee, his back to her, and wondered when they had stopped facing each other. Lucas's bag still sat near the stairs. Daniel didn't mention it. "You didn't tell me your brother was coming," Evelyn said carefully. Daniel paused, then shrugged. "He does what he wants, always has." Something cold slid into her chest. The dismissal was too easy, too rehearsed. She realized then that Lucas's return hadn't surprised Daniel at all. As Daniel left for the bedroom, Evelyn stayed rooted in place, her thoughts racing. Memories surfaced uninvited. Unanswered messages, unexplained absences, arguments that ended before they began. She had learned to minimize herself, to soften questions until they disappeared. Silence had become their shared language. Later, when Lucas emerged, freshly showered and cautious, the tension thickened again. He greeted Daniel politely, almost formally. The brothers exchanged looks that carried more history than words. "Stay as long as you need," Daniel said, voice flat. Lucas met Evelyn's eyes for half a second too long. Thanks. Daniel left shortly after, the door closing with finality. Only then did Evelyn feel herself breathe. You okay? Lucas asked quietly. She considered lying, then stopped. I don't know any more. Lucas nodded as if that answer confirmed something he already suspected. He didn't push, he never pushed. That restraint felt dangerous in its own way. As the day wore on, Evelyn moved through the house mechanically. She noticed how empty it felt even when occupied, how the walls seemed to absorb sound. Her marriage had not collapsed overnight. It had eroded, grain by grain, until only structure remained. That evening, as rain streaked the windows, Evelyn found herself standing beside Lucas in the living room. No touching. No confessions, just shared space. Daniel wasn't always like this, she said suddenly. Lucas didn't respond right away. When he did, his voice was low. Neither was I. The words hung between them, unfinished and heavy. Evelyn sensed there was more beneath them, something buried, something that explained why Lucas had come back now. Upstairs, her phone vibrated. A message from Daniel, we need to talk tonight. Evelyn stared at the screen, knowing the silence was about to break, and whatever followed would not be gentle. She thought of the lock turning the night before, the quiet click that felt irreversible. Lucas had crossed a threshold, but so had she. Whatever Daniel wanted to discuss would not be about schedules or excuses. It would be about control, about truths pressing against the walls. Evelyn understood then that silence had protected them once, but now it was a weapon aimed inward, and it was already cutting. The conversation waiting upstairs promised damage, and she sensed Lucas would be pulled into it, whether he wanted to. The conversation Daniel promised never happened. He returned home late, brushed past Evelyn with a distracted kiss on her cheek, and locked himself in the bedroom with his phone. The silence returned, thicker than before, stretched tight like a wire ready to snap. Lucas noticed. That night the house felt smaller. Shadows clung to the corners, and the low hum of the refrigerator echoed like distant breathing. Evelyn stood at the sink long after the dishes were clean, staring at her reflection in the dark glass of the window. She looked unfamiliar to herself, as if someone else had stepped into her life while she wasn't paying attention. You don't have to pretend, Lucas said from behind her. She turned. He stood a few feet away, hands in his pockets, careful not to invade her space. That caution unsettled her more than boldness would have. Pretend what? She asked. That everything's fine. The words loosened something inside her. She sat at the table, suddenly exhausted, and Lucas took the chair across from her. The distance felt intentional, respectful, and yet unbearably intimate. He disappears, Evelyn said quietly, for hours, sometimes days, and when he's here it's like I'm invisible. Lucas listened without interruption. When she finished, he exhaled slowly. That's always been his way. Control through absence, she frowned. What do you mean? Lucas looked down, jaw tightening. Daniel likes people uncertain. It keeps them manageable. The statement sent a chill through her. You're talking like you know this from experience. I do. He hesitated, then spoke again, his voice lower. I left because of him, because I saw what he was capable of. Evelyn's pulse quickened. You never told anyone that? No one asked. Their eyes met and something shifted. Not desire yet, but recognition. Two people standing too close to the same truth. Later, the power went out. The lights died without warning, plunging the house into darkness. Evelyn gasped, instinctively reaching out. Her hand brushed Lucas's arm. Neither of them moved away. It's just the storm, he said, though his voice sounded strained. They stood there, silhouettes in the dark, breaths uneven. Evelyn was suddenly aware of how close he was, of the warmth radiating from him. It felt wrong to notice. It felt impossible not to. I should check the breaker, Lucas said. He moved past her, but her fingers lingered against his sleeve for half a second too long. When the lights flickered back on, neither spoke. Later still, thunder rolled overhead as they sat on opposite ends of the couch, pretending to watch the rain. Daniel remained upstairs, unreachable. The distance between Evelyn and Lucas slowly collapsed, not physically but emotionally, inch by inch. I don't know who I am anymore, Evelyn whispered. Lucas turned to her. You're someone who's been quiet for too long. The words landed harder than any accusation. She laughed softly, a sound close to breaking. Without thinking, she leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees. Lucas mirrored her movement. Their faces were suddenly close. For one suspended moment, neither breathed. Evelyn pulled back first, heart racing. This isn't okay. Lucas nodded, but his eyes didn't leave hers. I know. The storm raged outside, mirroring the chaos building within her. She stood abruptly. We should get some sleep. As she walked away, she felt his gaze follow her. At the bedroom door, she paused, hand trembling on the frame. Behind her, Lucas spoke again, barely above a whisper. "This already started long before tonight." Evelyn closed the door, knowing that whatever line they had crossed was no longer visible, and tomorrow it would be easier to cross again. Morning arrived without relief. Evelyn woke with the echo of Lucas's words lodged in her chest, the sense that something irreversible had already been set in motion. Daniel had left early, as if distance were an obligation he needed to meet. The space he left behind felt intentional. At breakfast, Evelyn rehearsed normalcy. She washed a single mug, straightened cushions, erased evidence of unease. When Lucas entered the kitchen, she avoided his eyes, afraid of what recognition might invite. They spoke only of small things: weather, coffee, how long Lucas planned to stay. Each harmless sentence concealed something heavier underneath. By afternoon, the lie formed. Daniel called, his voice clipped. "Everything okay at home?" "Yes," Evelyn said too quickly. "All quiet." It was the first time she had lied to him without hesitation. The ease of it startled her. She ended the call and stared at her phone, waiting for guilt to arrive. "It didn't," Lucas watched her from the hallway. "You didn't have to do that." "I know," she replied, "but I did." The words tasted strange, almost powerful. A boundary had been crossed, subtle but decisive. She was no longer only reacting, she was choosing. That evening they shared dinner alone. Daniel texted that he would be late again. The house seemed to respond, settling into secrecy. Conversation deepened, drifting toward memory and regret. Lucas spoke about leaving town, about the relief of escape and the ache of unfinished things. Evelyn listened, drawn in by his honesty. She told him things she had never said aloud. How lonely marriage could be, how silence could bruise. With every confession, the distance between them narrowed. When their hands touched as she passed him a plate, neither apologized. The contact lingered, brief yet electric, before breaking away. Evelyn stood suddenly. "This has to stop." Lucas nodded, though disappointment flickered across his face. "I don't want to hurt you." The statement landed heavier than desire. Hurt was already present. It lived in the walls, pretending otherwise felt dishonest. Later, alone in her bedroom, Evelyn replayed the day. The lie echoed loudest. She realized it wasn't meant to protect Lucas from Daniel. It was meant to protect herself from the truth. Downstairs, Lucas paced the living room, unable to quiet his thoughts. He told himself restraint was necessary, that whatever was growing between them needed boundaries. But restraint had never been his strength around Daniel's shadows. He replayed old arguments, remembered doors slammed and threats disguised as concern. Coming back had reopened wounds he thought distance had healed. He wondered if Evelyn sensed the danger beneath Daniel's calm, or if she was only beginning to. When he finally sat, exhaustion pulled at him, yet sleep refused to come. The house felt watchful, as if walls had learned to remember. In that uneasy stillness, Lucas understood that staying would change everything. Leaving might destroy her anyway. He feared the question that hovered, the one Daniel always used to trap people. Truth, once spoken, never returned quietly. Lucas knew silence could be cruel, but exposure could be lethal. And somewhere upstairs, Evelyn stood at the center of it, unknowingly balancing both outcomes. The next move would belong to Daniel, and everyone sensed it. Waiting made the fear sharper, stretching time until truth demanded a voice. None of them could step back now, not without consequences, waiting. Her phone buzzed near midnight. A message from Daniel appeared on the screen. "Did Lucas tell you why he really left?" Evelyn stared at the words, understanding that the lie had opened a door she could no longer close. Lucas waited until night to speak. Daniel had gone out again, offering no explanation, and Margaret's door was closed, her silence intentional. The house felt suspended, breath held, as if it knew something was about to surface. They sat in the living room with only a lamp on. Shadows carved their faces into unfamiliar shapes. Evelyn's hands trembled in her lap. She didn't ask questions. She knew whatever Lucas was about to say had weight. "I didn't leave because I was restless," Lucas began. "I left because I was scared." The word landed heavily. Evelyn leaned forward. "Of what?" "Of him and of what he makes people do." Lucas spoke slowly, choosing each sentence like a step across thin ice. He told her about years of watching Daniel turn concern into leverage, kindness into obligation. About conversations that ended with apologies Lucas didn't owe. About promises that felt like traps once spoken. "He doesn't hit," Lucas said. "He doesn't need to. He convinces you that resisting him makes you the villain." Evelyn felt a chill of recognition. Memories rearranged themselves, small moments suddenly sharp with meaning. Arguments where she'd ended up apologizing, decisions she thought were mutual but never truly were. Margaret knows, Lucas continued. She always has, Evelyn swallowed. Why would she allow it? Because Daniel keeps the family intact, Lucas said bitterly, at least on the surface. Lucas admitted there had been someone else once, not a lover but a friend who challenged Daniel who refused to comply. That person left abruptly, reputation quietly damaged, story rewritten. Lucas had seen the pattern forming and understood his place within it. I realized if I stayed, I'd become him, Lucas said. Or worse, help him. Evelyn closed her eyes. The room felt smaller, air thinner. Why tell me now? Because you're next, he said gently. The honesty terrified her. She stood and paced, trying to outrun the implications. You don't know that? I do, Lucas replied. I see the signs, the isolation, the way he positions himself as the only constant. Evelyn stopped. Then why come back? Lucas hesitated. Because when I heard you married him, I hoped I was wrong. Silence stretched between them, thick and charged. The truth pressed against Evelyn's chest until breathing hurt. She realized Lucas hadn't returned for closure. He had returned for intervention. A noise upstairs made them both freeze, footsteps, a door opening then closing. Margaret moving unseen, aware. Evelyn wondered how much she had overheard, how long she had been listening. Lucas lowered his voice. There's more. He told her about documents Daniel kept, messages saved, leverage collected like insurance. About how truth was cataloged and deployed when necessary. Daniel didn't explode. He waited. Evelyn felt sick. Why haven't you gone to the police? Lucas shook his head. Because nothing he does looks criminal until it's too late. The weight of that settled heavily. Evelyn realized knowledge itself was dangerous. Knowing changed how you were treated. A tear slipped down her cheek. She wiped it away angrily. What am I supposed to do? Lucas stood, closing the distance carefully. You decide who controls your silence. Their proximity felt different now, charged not with desire but with shared threat. Evelyn understood the bond forming was forged by fear and clarity, not romance. Her phone buzzed suddenly. A message from Daniel lit the screen. We'll talk tomorrow, all of us. Evelyn looked up at Lucas, dread and resolve colliding. Whatever Daniel knew, he was ready to use it. The truth Lucas had given her was not protection. It was a warning, and the cost of hearing it had already begun. Outside, rain tapped against the windows, steady and impatient. Evelyn imagined morning arriving with nothing resolved, only choices narrowed. She knew Chapter 6 would demand action, not reflection. Secrets once spoken refused to stay contained. If Daniel controlled the house, then knowledge would become currency. She straightened, breath steadying. Whatever came next would test loyalty, love, and survival. The line Lucas revealed could not be unseen. Consequences were already moving, and she was finally awake enough to meet them without silence, even if it meant crossing again. Tonight's truth would demand proof tomorrow. Soon. The message Daniel sent lingered like a threat. Morning arrived with false calm, sunlight washing over a house already tense with secrets. Evelyn moved carefully, as if sudden motion might expose what now lived inside her. Lucas avoided her eyes, yet his presence anchored her, a reminder that knowledge could not be undone. Daniel left early, unusually cheerful, kissing Evelyn's cheek with performative warmth. We'll all talk later, he said. The promise sounded rehearsed. As the door closed, the house exhaled. They tried distance. It failed by noon. Evelyn found Lucas in the garage, sorting through old boxes that smelled of dust and oil. She watched him from the doorway, seeing him not as Daniel's brother, but as the only person who had named the danger aloud. If he knows, she said, we don't have much time. Lucas nodded. Then we stop pretending. The honesty stripped away restraint. Their conversation turned raw, voices low, confessions unguarded. Fear blurred into urgency. When Evelyn reached for Lucas, it was not impulsive. It was deliberate, a decision made with full awareness of consequence. He hesitated once, long enough to matter, then pulled her close. The kiss was quiet, almost reverent, charged less with desire than relief. For a moment the house fell away. They crossed the line fully, choosing each other not as escape but as defiance. In the spare bedroom they moved carefully, as if gentleness could soften betrayal. Guilt flickered, then vanished beneath the need to feel seen. After reality returned sharper, Evelyn dressed quickly, heart racing. This changes everything, she said. Lucas met her gaze. It already had. They agreed on secrecy, on caution, on control. Promises felt thin but necessary. Evelyn returned to the kitchen, scrubbing her hands as if evidence could be erased. Her phone buzzed, Daniel again. She didn't answer. By evening, tension tightened. Dinner passed in fragments, each sound amplified. Daniel arrived late, eyes bright with something unreadable. He asked about Lucas's day, about Evelyn's errands, cataloging responses. She lied smoothly, surprised by how easily the words came. Later, rain drove them indoors. The power flickered, then steadied. Evelyn stood at the window, breath fogging the glass, when a presence settled behind her. Lucas, no touching this time. Just closeness. It felt dangerous. Footsteps sounded in the hall. Margaret appeared at the doorway, framed by lamplight. She took in the scene, distance too small, silence too intimate, and understood immediately. Her face did not change. That was the most frightening part. She said nothing. She simply watched, eyes calculating, absorbing the truth without reaction. Then she turned and walked away. Evelyn's stomach dropped. She saw. Lucas nodded, jaw tight. She always does. The house seemed to tilt. Margaret's silence was not mercy, it was strategy. Evelyn realized the affair was no longer theirs to manage. It belonged to the family now, and families protected themselves ruthlessly. Upstairs, a door closed softly. Somewhere, Daniel moved, unaware or pretending not to be. Evelyn felt the weight of inevitability settle. This had been the affair no one was meant to see, and yet it had been seen by the one person whose loyalty could destroy them. Lucas squeezed her hand once. "Whatever comes next," he said, "won't be quiet." Evelyn nodded, understanding that exposure had shifted power. As the house settled into watchful stillness, she knew the next confrontation would not come from Daniel, but from the woman who had just chosen silence over truth. That night stretched endlessly. Evelyn lay awake, counting sounds. Daniel's measured steps, Margaret's deliberate pacing, the house breathing around them. She understood then that mothers guarded legacies, not children, and that Margaret's gaze had weighed costs faster than love. By morning, alliances would harden. Silence would be sharpened into warning. Evelyn pictured Margaret at the kitchen table, tea cooling, loyalty aligning itself like a blade. Whatever mercy might have existed was already spent. When dawn finally crept in, pale and unforgiving, Evelyn felt certain of one thing. The family would close ranks, and the truth would be used to threaten, not heal. The cost would be survival, and someone would be chosen to pay it before anyone spoke aloud. Margaret would speak, and the house would listen. Margaret Carter had always ruled the house without raising her voice. Her presence settled into rooms like dust, quiet, inevitable, impossible to remove. Evelyn felt it now as she stood in the kitchen, aware that Margaret knew everything and had chosen silence as her weapon. The older woman moved with deliberate calm, setting a teacup on the counter as if nothing in the world were out of place. Her eyes, sharp and observant, flicked briefly toward the hallway, then back to Evelyn. "You look tired," Margaret said. Evelyn swallowed. "It's been a long week." Margaret nodded, satisfied. She did not mention what she had seen. She did not accuse or comfort. That restraint was more unsettling than anger. Evelyn realized Margaret's power came not from confrontation, but from control of what remained unspoken. Lucas entered moments later, tension etched into his posture. He stopped when he saw his mother, a flicker of something unreadable crossing his face. "Morning," he said. Margaret studied him carefully. "You're staying longer than expected." "For now," Lucas replied. "For now," she repeated, as if testing the phrase. Then she turned away, ending the exchange. The message was clear. She was watching, and she was waiting. As the day unfolded, Margaret lingered in shared spaces, her silence pressing down on both of them. Evelyn felt exposed, every glance heavy with implication. She wondered how long Margaret had been protecting Daniel, how many truths had been buried under her quiet approval. That evening, Margaret finally spoke. She found Evelyn alone in the living room, dusk darkening the windows. "You married into this family knowing who Daniel was," she said calmly. Evelyn's chest tightened. "I thought I did." Margaret sat across from her, folding her hands neatly. "Daniel has always needed loyalty. He gives stability in return." "Stability?" Evelyn repeated, hollow. Margaret leaned forward. "What you're doing threatens that balance." Evelyn felt heat rise in her face. "You're talking about your sons like this is business." Margaret's expression hardened. "Family is business, and survival." The words struck deep. Evelyn understood then that Margaret's allegiance was not to truth or morality, but to preservation. Daniel was not protected because he was right, but because he was necessary. Later, Lucas confronted his mother in the hallway. "You saw us." Margaret didn't deny it. "I saw a mistake forming." "You always choose him," Lucas said quietly. "I choose this family," she replied, "and Daniel holds it together." Lucas laughed bitterly. "By breaking everyone else." Margaret stepped closer. "You left once, don't make me choose against you now." The threat was subtle, wrapped in concern. Lucas recoiled, shaken. Evelyn watched from the doorway, realizing how deeply this loyalty ran, how long it had shaped every silence. That night, Lucas unraveled. He paced, guilt and anger colliding. "She'll protect him no matter what," he said to Evelyn, "even if it destroys you." Evelyn felt fear coil in her stomach. "Then what do we do?" Lucas hesitated. "We tell the truth. Or we disappear." Before she could answer, Margaret appeared at the stairs, her voice low and final. "If this comes out," she warned, "someone will not survive it." The words lingered, heavy with promise, as the house settled into uneasy quiet, preparing for the danger ahead. Evelyn barely slept after Margaret's warning. The house seemed alert, as if listening for the next mistake. Morning light exposed nothing new, yet everything felt changed. Daniel returned for breakfast, composed and attentive in a way that unsettled her more than his absence ever had. He watched her closely. "You seem distracted." "I didn't sleep," Evelyn said. "Neither did I," Daniel replied, smiling faintly. Lucas joined them late, tension evident in his shoulders. Daniel greeted him with forced warmth, offering coffee, asking polite questions. The performance was flawless. Evelyn felt trapped between them, sensing a current she could not name. After Daniel left for work, the relief was brief. Lucas leaned against the counter, voice low. "He knows." Evelyn shook her head. "About us? About something," Lucas said, "and with him that's enough." They tried to act normal, but the house resisted. Every sound felt amplified. Evelyn jumped when her phone rang. It was Daniel again. "Dinner tonight," he said. "All of us?" The word landed like a challenge. That evening, Daniel cooked. The normalcy was unnerving. Margaret joined them, her expression unreadable. Conversation stayed shallow, circling safely around truth. Yet Daniel's eyes kept returning to Lucas, measuring. Halfway through the meal, Daniel set his fork down. "Lucas," he said casually, "do you remember why you really left?" Lucas stiffened. Evelyn's breath caught. "I needed space," Lucas replied. Daniel smiled. "From what?" Silence stretched. Margaret didn't intervene. Evelyn felt her pulse roar in her ears. Lucas stood. "This isn't the time." Daniel rose too, blocking his path. "It's always the time." The air thickened, dangerous and charged. Evelyn stepped between them. "Stop!" Daniel turned to her, eyes sharp. "You're protecting him now?" The accusation cut deeper than she expected. "I'm asking you not to do this." Daniel's voice dropped. "Do what? Ask questions?" Lucas moved back, jaw clenched. "You don't get to interrogate me." Daniel laughed softly. "In my house, I do." Margaret finally spoke. Enough, but the damage was done. Daniel stepped away, masking his anger. "Finish dinner," he said. "We'll talk later." That night, Lucas paced like a trapped animal. "He's setting something up," he said. "I should leave." "No," Evelyn said, panic rising. "If you go now, it looks like guilt." Lucas stopped, meeting her eyes. "This isn't about appearances anymore. It's about survival." The word echoed Margaret's warning. Evelyn felt fear harden into resolve. "Then we expose him, whatever he's hiding." Lucas hesitated. "If we do that, there's no turning back." Before she could respond, a crash echoed upstairs. Daniel's voice followed, sharp and commanding. "Lucas, now!" Evelyn froze. The moment had arrived faster than expected. Lucas squeezed her hand once, a silent promise or goodbye, then headed for the stairs. Evelyn followed, heart pounding, knowing whatever happened next would change them all. At the top of the stairs, Daniel waited in the shadows, calm and ready, as if he had planned this confrontation for a very long time. Evelyn felt Margaret's presence behind her, unmoving, choosing observation over intervention. The corridor seemed to narrow, walls closing in as Daniel gestured toward his study. The door stood open, light spilling out like an invitation and a threat. "Whatever you want to say," Lucas said, "say it where everyone can hear." Daniel's smile returned, thin and controlled. "Some things are better discussed privately." Evelyn understood then that privacy was Daniel's weapon. Doors closed meant narratives rewritten. She stepped forward. "I'm coming too." Daniel considered her, then nodded. "Of course you are." They moved together, unwillingly bound, toward the room where secrets were kept. Evelyn crossed the threshold with a sinking certainty that love had already turned into something sharper, something capable of cutting them all. As the door began to close behind them, she realized the night was no longer about feelings or choices, but about consequences waiting to be claimed. No one would leave unchanged tonight. The study smelled of old paper and control. Daniel closed the door behind them with deliberate calm, the click of the lock echoing louder than any shout could have. The room felt sealed off from the rest of the house, from witnesses, from escape. Evelyn stood near the doorway, heart hammering. Lucas remained closer to the desk, his posture rigid, defensive. Daniel moved slowly, circling them the way a patient predator might, his voice steady and almost gentle. "I warned you once," Daniel said, eyes fixed on Lucas. "Distance keeps things manageable." Lucas laughed sharply. "You don't manage people, you corner them." Daniel stopped. "Is that what you've been telling my wife?" The word wife landed like a blow. Evelyn stepped forward. "This isn't about him." Daniel turned to her, expression unreadable. "Everything is about him. It always has been." Years of silence cracked open. Daniel spoke of sacrifice, of responsibility, of carrying the family while others ran. Lucas fired back with memories of threats disguised as concern, of emotional traps that left no clean exits. Their voices rose, overlapping, filling the room until Evelyn felt buried beneath them. "You drove me away," Lucas said. "You always have to win." Daniel's jaw tightened. "I kept this family intact." "At what cost?" Evelyn asked, surprising herself. Daniel looked at her then, truly looked. Something shifted behind his eyes. "You chose the wrong side." The words stripped away pretense. Evelyn felt fear surge, sharp and undeniable. "There shouldn't be sides." Daniel stepped closer. "There always are." The argument exploded. Lucas accused Daniel of manipulation, of controlling Margaret, of shaping reality to suit himself. Daniel responded with cold precision, listing Lucas's failures, his impulsiveness, his weakness. Each sentence was calculated to wound. "You think you're protecting her?" Daniel sneered. "You're just using her." Lucas lunged forward. "Don't!" Evelyn shouted both their names, but it was too late. Daniel shoved Lucas back hard. Lucas stumbled, hitting the edge of the desk. Papers scattered, a glass frame shattered, cutting his arm. Blood appeared instantly, bright against white skin. Time fractured. "Stop!" Evelyn screamed. Daniel froze, shock flickering across his face at the sight of blood. Lucas pressed a hand to his arm, eyes blazing. "You see," he said. "This is who you are." Daniel moved again, faster this time, reaching for Lucas. Instinct took over. Evelyn grabbed the nearest object, a heavy metal letter opener from the desk, and stepped between them. "Don't touch him," she said, voice shaking. Daniel stared at the object in her hand, then at her face. "You'd threaten me. I'm done being quiet." For a moment, nothing moved. Rain battered the windows, thunder shaking the walls. Daniel laughed softly. "You think this ends well for you?" He advanced. Lucas shouted her name. Evelyn felt everything collapse into a single point of terror and clarity. When Daniel grabbed her wrist, she reacted without thinking, driving the letter opener forward. It happened quickly. A sharp inhale. A gasp. Daniel staggered back, hand pressed to his side, disbelief etched across his face. Blood spread through his shirt. Evelyn dropped the weapon, horrified. "I didn't." Daniel fell to his knees, then to the floor. Silence swallowed the room. Lucas rushed to him, checking for signs of life. His hands came away red. He looked up at Evelyn, eyes wide with realization. "Evelyn!" Margaret's scream pierced the house as she appeared in the doorway. She took in the scene, the blood, her son on the floor, Evelyn standing frozen, and something inside her shattered permanently. "What have you done?" Margaret whispered. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Someone had called, maybe a neighbor. Maybe Margaret herself. Evelyn couldn't remember. She sank into a chair, shaking uncontrollably. The study, once a place of quiet power, had become a crime scene. Truth lay exposed, soaked in blood. Lucas knelt beside her. "We'll tell them everything," he said. "The truth." Evelyn stared at Daniel's still body, understanding the weight of what could never be undone. The lines they crossed had led here to this irreversible moment. As flashing lights filled the windows and footsteps thundered toward the door, Evelyn realized the night had not only shattered the family, it had sealed their fate. What came next would be about stories, about blame, about who would survive the truth. The house no longer belonged to them. By morning, it was filled with strangers, uniforms, gloves, clipped voices cataloging what remained after violence. Evelyn sat wrapped in a thin blanket, staring at the floor as if it might open and swallow her whole. Every sound felt distant, unreal, as though she were watching someone else's life collapse. Detectives moved carefully, their questions precise. Evelyn answered when asked, her voice flat, stripped of emotion by shock. She told them about the argument, the shove, the moment fear took control. She did not embellish, she did not cry. Truth, she learned quickly, did not need drama to wound. Lucas was questioned separately. She watched him from across the room, his hands trembling despite his efforts to stay composed. When their eyes met, a shared understanding passed between them. Whatever love existed would not survive what came next. Margaret sat rigid in a chair, spine straight, face carved from denial. When detectives asked her questions, her answers came measured and selective. She spoke of Daniel's stress, his responsibilities, his temper only when unavoidable. She did not speak of control, she did not speak of fear. Loyalty still guided her even now. By afternoon, the house was silent again, emptied of investigators but not of consequences. Daniel's body was gone, yet his presence lingered in every shadow. Evelyn felt hollow, as if something essential had been taken with him, not love but certainty. At the station, hours blurred together. Evelyn repeated her story until it felt memorized, until the words lost meaning. She noticed how truth bent under repetition, how perspective shaped interpretation. Each retelling seemed to cost something, a fragment of dignity, a piece of resolve. A detective finally sat across from her, eyes kind but unyielding. The evidence suggests this wasn't entirely spontaneous. Evelyn's chest tightened. I was afraid. I believe that, he said, but fear doesn't erase planning. She thought of the letter opener always there on the desk, of Daniel's study designed for control, of how many nights she had imagined standing up to him, even without knowing it. The line between impulse and intention felt thin, dangerously so. Lucas was released pending further investigation. Evelyn was not. As they led her away, she caught one last glimpse of him, standing alone under fluorescent lights. His face was etched with guilt, grief, and something like relief. She wondered which emotion would consume him first. Days later, headlines surfaced. Neighbors whispered. The family name became a spectacle, stripped of privacy and power. Margaret retreated into silence, refusing interviews, refusing grief in public. Her loyalty had cost her both sons in different ways. In her cell, Evelyn replayed the night endlessly. She questioned every movement, every word. Had she wanted it to end? Had some part of her known this was inevitable? The answers refused to settle, shifting with her mood, her fear, her exhaustion. When her lawyer spoke of charges, of possible sentences, Evelyn listened without protest. Justice felt abstract compared to the weight pressing on her chest. She had crossed a line even if it had been drawn by years of manipulation. Truth did not absolve, it only clarified. Lucas visited once. The glass between them felt cruel but necessary. I should have left, he said quietly. So should I, Evelyn replied. They shared a sad, knowing smile. Love had not saved them, it had sharpened the fall. As he stood to leave, Lucas hesitated. They're still digging, he warned. About Daniel, about everything. Evelyn nodded. Then let them. She returned to her seat, alone with the certainty that truth demanded payment from everyone it touched. Whatever emerged next, trial, exposure, reckoning, would not be gentle. The past was unraveling thread by thread, and soon nothing hidden would remain. Trial did not bring closure. It brought exposure. Every detail spilled into public record, stripped of context and mercy. Daniel Carter's name became shorthand for control and cruelty, while Evelyn's became a question no one agreed on. Victim, manipulator, murderer. The truth existed somewhere in between, fractured and uncomfortable. Evelyn listened as testimony replayed her life in fragments, messages read aloud, arguments reconstructed, silence translated into implication. She watched strangers debate her motives as if they were facts, felt her inner world flattened into timelines and exhibits. Justice, she realized, had no room for nuance. Lucas testified once. His voice shook as he spoke of fear, of growing up under Daniel's shadow, of leaving to survive. He did not mention love. Some truths were too fragile for courtrooms. When he stepped down, he did not look at Evelyn. That restraint hurt more than distance. Margaret never took the stand. She sat rigid each day, face composed, eyes empty. Loyalty had cost her everything, yet she clung to it even now. When reporters asked questions, she said nothing. Silence had always been her final defense. The verdict came quietly. Evelyn accepted it without reaction. Sentencing followed, heavy but measured, acknowledging circumstance without excusing outcome. The gavel's echo marked the end of one life and the beginning of another she did not recognize. Prison was not what she feared most. It was the stillness, the time to remember without interruption. She replayed choices endlessly, tracing how one locked door led to another. She understood now that crossing a line was rarely sudden. It was practiced in small permissions granted to oneself. Outside, the family disintegrated. Margaret sold the house, unable to live among ghosts. Lucas left town again, this time without plans to return. He sent Evelyn one letter, short and careful, apologizing for loving her when love had been a liability. She read it until the paper softened, then hid it away. Years passed. Headlines faded. New scandals replaced old ones, yet the damage lingered quietly, privately, the way real ruin always does. The Carters became a cautionary story told without empathy, their complexity reduced to a warning. On the anniversary of Daniel's death, Evelyn sat alone in her cell, listening to the sounds of other lives continuing around her. She no longer searched for forgiveness. She searched for understanding. The difference mattered. She admitted things she once denied. That being seen had felt intoxicating. That danger had masqueraded as affection. That silence had taught her how to disappear long before violence taught her how to fight. None of it justified what she had done. It only explained how she arrived there. In therapy, she spoke about lines, how families draw them, how love tempts people to erase them, how power redraws them when convenient. She learned that truth did not heal, it clarified responsibility. Healing required something harder. One afternoon, a counselor asked if she regretted it. Evelyn considered the question carefully. Regret implied longing for a different past. She no longer believed that existed. "I regret the cost," she said, "not the clarity." The counselor nodded, unsettled. When Evelyn looked back, she did not see a single moment of collapse. She saw a family structured around silence, rewarded for obedience, punished for honesty. She saw how loyalty became a weapon, how love became leverage, how truth arrived only after everything else was gone. The family never recovered. There were no reunions, no reconciliations, no quiet forgiveness waiting at the end. There was only distance, memory, and consequence. And in that final understanding, Evelyn accepted the most unsettling truth of all. Crossing the line had not destroyed the family. It had only revealed what was already broken. If you found this story fascinating, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. We post true crime case videos every night. Until next time, stay sharp, stay alert.